Good morning. Give everybody a few minutes to get in and get settled. But welcome, welcome, welcome. We're really excited to be here today with all of you. My name is Celia Schlomer, and I'm going to facilitate at least the beginning of this, and then I'm going to hand it over to the real experts in this arena around charting the life course and using it within the community, supporting providers, and making sure that we were able to really facilitate some great lives for individuals with disabilities, or as I affectionately say often when I do this work, I say, get out of their way. So I just want to thank you again for being here. A second, I'm having a technical issue. Hold on 1 second. Here we go. I lost you all for a second. So we're here today. I'm joined today by Jenna Allen and Britta Hugh. I'm going to let you guys just a brief introduction of yourselves, wave so they can see you in the pile of faces. And just real quick, just give us a quick hello and where you're from so they know that.
And can we mention the poll real quick?
Okay, go ahead and launch. I'm sorry. Yes, we're going to launch a poll. We're asking, I believe, three questions. Many of these questions are necessary for us to meet the requirements of the funding that we acquire that allows us to do this and provide these trainings and CEUs for free. In addition to that, they're helpful to our presenters to really tweak this and cater it directly to the folks that are in the room. So if you'll be so kind as to answer those that you're comfortable with, we would really appreciate it. How are we doing on percentages? You okay to move forward, you guys think? Or
Well, we've had 72 people of the 155 in the room vote, so maybe we'll leave it up while Britta and Jenna introduce themselves real briefly, like you suggested. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jenna Allen. I work at Ocali in the Lifespan Transition Center. And I also spent most of my professional life in the provider space, assisting with community involvement and engagement, as well as employment supports for people with disabilities.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Britta Huff. I'm a Community Life Engagement Project Manager with the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities. I work in the Cleveland area, but I'm also have coworkers all across the state that work with our stakeholders to help ensure that people have access to services and supports that help them lead a life that's important to them. And so we cover employment first, technology first, but all things community. So really excited to be here with you today and got to go through the ambassador training series with Charting the Life course with Jenna. And so we're excited to talk with you today.
And again, I said, my name is Celia Schlomer, and I am actually a community engagement specialist at the University of Cincinnati Center for Excellence in Developmental Disability. But more important in this room, I am a Charting the Life course ambassador and help support the work of the Family Resource Network of Ohio across the state, sharing Charting the Life course and how it can be utilized to improve lives for families and individuals across the state. So we're really excited to be here, as I said before. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide and we'll get started. So I want to give you just the tenets really quickly before Britta and Jenna get started of the Charting the Life course framework and tools. So all of this work is about the individual. It's that person at the center of our work that helps us really think about and want to grow a life in the community, right? But we can't forget that person is always surrounded by family. And we always have to look at that person within the context of their family. Go ahead, Jenna. There we go. In the context of their family, because family is at the root of all our lives, right? And we know that 89% of individuals with disability live either with a family member or in a family home or supported by family. And so we can't leave them out of the equation. In addition to that, we want to look at those lives in a way that we look at all our lives. We in Charting the Life course talk about the domains or those different aspects of life that we are juggling day in and day out. And we'll go more in depth with these, but just knowing that it includes, what am I going to do all day? Where do I do it? Where's important to me? And how do I make sure that place that I live, that community that I'm a part of, supports me in a way that my needs are met and that I have something to give back to them. In addition to that, we want to remember that everybody has a social and spiritual side that they may be developing. There's always that place of health and remaining healthy, and then that safety and security. And then lastly, what we call, pardon me, advocacy and community engagement. And that advocacy and engagement is about creating spaces where I'm valued when I'm gone, where I can speak in my voice about what's important to me and where I contribute. So those are the primary domains. But when we look at how we support families as a whole, we're going to talk about the 3 buckets of support. And this was a real game changer for me. I'll share that later. But there are 3 buckets of support. We're always looking at that goods and services bucket, what we can offer. That's what we tend to as professionals to go to. But the other 2 buckets that are equally, and I think safe to say sometimes more important than that goods and services bucket, is that peer-to-peer connection that allows us to walk along with someone else who's traveled this road, someone who knows or at least understands the space that we're in. And then that information and navigation. What do I need to know in order to move forward in my life and to have those things that I want? And then lastly, we're going to learn a little bit and hear a little bit about the integrated support star. And that really is this space of not gravitating to goods and services and things I'm eligible for. Because a life of eligibility is not a life. We all have aspects of our life beyond what we're eligible for. And very few of us are satisfied with our life only utilizing, accessing, and sharing what we are eligible for. We have, what we bring into any room, our own personal strengths and assets. We have those relationships of people that are important to us to be part of our day, every day. We have those communities that we belong to and that we facilitate growth in the communities around things that we're passionate about. We join in spaces so that we are part and hold membership and are valued in that membership. And then lastly, technology. We all utilize technology, especially in the last 3 years. I'm kind of beyond talking about the fact that technology is so much more a part of our lives. Look at the room we're in right now. So we do this across a lifespan, right? And that's upward trajectory is where we're trying to move towards that thing that's really important to us. And it's an upward positive movement. It's not always straight. We're going to go up and down, but we're moving along that trajectory. So those are the kind of primary tenets of Charting the Life course that we wanted to make sure you kind of had underneath. But more importantly, I want you to kind of know what it is and what it isn't. And this has just always been a great space to share because we talk a lot about the pieces of it, but what does that really mean? So when we talk about Charting the Life course, when we encourage you as families or as professionals, providers, to look at this as a way of thinking and really having it become an integral part of how you build the things you build within your family or within your organization, it really changes the conversation. It's truly a different way of highlighting things we've always known. We've always known it's important to be person-centered, but it really changes that thinking of how we look at it and how we do it. It's encouraging. We really hold ourselves to higher expectations and really think a little broader. The conversations may take a little longer initially, but once it becomes ingrained in your thinking, it becomes second nature. It's about having experiences moving along that trajectory towards what I want. And we're all better at moving towards what we want versus kind of trudging along for what we have to or what we're told to, right? So, it really takes us to a place where we don't look as systems to have all the answers, as families to have all the answers, because what we're talking about is integrating those multiple types of supports, community supports, personal supports, relationships that we have, and yes, the things that we might qualify for. And as importantly as what it is remembering what it's not. Okay, it's not just for professionals. We don't do Charting the Life course on someone. We don't do it to someone. We do it with, or we support them as they do it. It's not just about filling out a trajectory or filling out a star. It really is more about those conversations that I spoke of and really going in depth into those conversations. It's not a program, it's not a curriculum, it's not something we first do A, we get to do B. You can jump in at any point. I hear families all the time feeling like maybe in different points of their journey, they feel like they're too late. They got the information too late. It's never too late to start thinking this way. It's not designed for just one age group, right? You can start any day at any age. We encourage early, but if you got an 18 or a 19 or a 20-year-old that you're supporting, or maybe a 54-year-old, it is not too late. And you can continue to think in this way to ensure that their life's hopes and dreams are at the front of the room whenever you're having conversations about what's next. And it's certainly not solely for people with disabilities. And I promise you, if you've not seen this before or you're new to this, as you hear Britta and Jenna talk, you will very quickly think of someone else in your life. You're like, oh, I got to tell them that, because it really is valuable information for any one of us to hear. We all have a trajectory. We're all juggling our trajectory against the other people that we're living with and working with all day long. So you will definitely get some valued information there. Go ahead. But if we're talking earlier, when we had that person in the context of their family and their community, I want to make sure that you kind of have a vision of what we are and were and what we're moving towards. So it's really important. If you look at this graphic on the left-hand side there, and you're seeing that person surrounded by services, but also within the context of their family and community. It's really important in this work. The transformation that really was at the root of this was taking away that barrier, that those services that we create don't get in the way of me fully connecting with my family or with my community. And that goes also for those supports that maybe even we build as parents. I can say that from the parent aspect. And then that idea of what we're building is that integration, so that that service system is no longer a barrier, but instead it's these integrated supports and services, including waiver services, that work more integrated within that life of family and community that we all thrive in as human beings. So I'm going to go ahead to the next slide. So how do we do this? I mentioned earlier those 3 buckets of support, the goods and services, the connecting and networking, and the discovery and navigation. And I will say, we as professionals gravitate to goods and services. It's really hard for us not to. Very quickly, when someone expresses a need or a frustration or a challenge in life, that we very quickly go, oh, there's this and there's this and there's this. And often it's out of that goods and services bucket, because that feels like a winner. Right? But I want to share with you that those connecting and network buckets and that discovery and navigation, knowing where to get information, knowing someone who else has walked the journey, is going to carry me longer and farther as an individual or as a family member than that goods and services. Goods and services, we've seen it come and go. Right? But that connecting and networking, discovery, navigation, the roots of those are really substantial. And then we can fill in with goods and services, maybe where those other 2 aren't able to offer the same level of support. Go ahead. I'm going to hand this over now to Britta, and she's going to really take those buckets a little deeper with you within the realm of what we're talking about today.
Good morning. Actually, I'm going to do this one today. It's Jenna here. So when you're thinking about those 3 buckets, one of the things that we talk about is this idea of we're all carrying our buckets around with us all of the time. Like Celia said, these aren't just disability related tools or concepts. These concepts apply to all of us. So one of the things that you can think about as you're supporting people is, how are you helping them fill their buckets? How are you helping them have full buckets in each of these areas? So these are just a few concrete examples. I'm sure you'll think of many more as you start using these tools with the people that you serve, but really thinking about the things that you can provide beyond those goods and services. We know that many of you who are participating today directly provide things like DoDD services and OOD services. Those are incredibly important to helping people achieve their goals and live the lives that they want. But that's not all that we can help with. We can help people to connect and network in their communities through all of these different ways that all of us access our community and meet people and share experiences. And then sometimes people really just need some support around discovery and navigation, learning about things that interest in them or finding out what they don't know. A lot of times that's a hard thing for us to get a handle on. What do I just not know that maybe I need a little bit of help discovering and navigating. So as we continue to talk about integration, just kind of keep these three buckets in mind as you think about all the different ways that you can wrap supports around a person. So today we're going to talk about charting the life course tools in a couple of different ways. We want to help you get ideas for how you can use these tools for yourself and your organization, but also for the families and the individuals that you support. One of the great things about charting life course tools is that, again, they are for everyone. When we say everyone, that can also mean again, you as a professional, you can use these tools for your own planning. You can use these tools to help your organization achieve the vision that you've laid out for yourself. And you can use these tools one by one with people to support them along their journey to the good life that they envision for themselves. So one of the things we're going to talk about quite a bit in today's training is the integrated support star. And you have a copy of this in the handouts for today. There are actually a couple of different versions of the support star, and we'll talk about those and how you might use them in a little bit more detail pretty soon. But just kind of going over the initial parts of the star first. Celia mentioned this in the introduction, but this is just a way of thinking about all of the different resources and supports that we all use. When we're using this individually, we tend to start with the segment on top. So really focusing in on what are our personal strengths and assets. When we're using this for organizational planning, we'd be thinking more about the assets of the organization. We also think about technology and relationships. Sometimes when we're thinking about how to achieve our goals or how to overcome barriers and challenges, we tend to go straight to the eligibility specific services that we may be able to access or provide. But it's equally important, if not more important, to think about these other types of connections that we can have and the other ways that we can fill our buckets. We can do that through formal and informal relationships, using technology of various sorts, and then accessing resources in the community that are available to all of us. So when you're getting started with the integrated support star, this is really just a quick how-to. It's oftentimes helpful to start with something smaller. Most people find that if you pick something fairly specific, a goal or a challenge, for instance, and then start using the star, it becomes easier to start thinking in this way about barriers, challenges, and goals, and then using the star for more complex needs too. So just a quick example of this. I apologize, my clicker is acting up today. For instance, maybe you're supporting somebody who wants to start their own business. We'd start with personal strengths and assets. And this is just a quick example. You'll probably have stars that have much more information in them than this, but we'll start thinking about, okay, well, what are the talents and the assets that you could bring to a business? Next, maybe who do you know? What relationships do you have that can help you meet this goal? What technology do you know how to use to help you meet this goal too? So you can kind of jump around on the star. People can do this individually. They can do this as part of a group discussion. There's really no right or wrong way to go through this process. But once you've kind of diagrammed out, here are some current, ways that we think that we can meet this goal, or assets that we can use to meet this goal. Then you can start putting in some ideas for future supports. So in this case, this person's pretty, talented at art. They would like to work for themselves. Maybe they can sell their art online. Maybe they can access areas in the community where other artists are working. They can get information from those folks. That kind of goes back to that connecting and networking bucket. And then, we can also use some eligibility specific resources in this place too. And you'll notice that in this case, this is really a group conversation. We can provide some day services to help support this person, maybe some employment services, but we can also potentially pull in other formal and paid supports. So HPC providers, for instance, can also help support the person around the goal. Really, one of the wonderful things about using these tools is that they help people organize their ideas, helps them remember things so that they don't just have a great idea and then it gets lost. And it helps them communicate their ideas with other people that can help them to support their goals. So one way that you can also think about helping people to have more integrated wraparound supports is to map someone's current supports. So this example shows, what some people's lives might look like currently, or what they may have looked like in the past. You can see if we color code this, there's a lot of eligibility-based supports here. Little bit of relationship support. The person uses some of their own personal assets and resources to support themselves when they're not getting paid services, but not a lot of other supports and connections to other resources. So if we think about how we can support people differently and how they can live richer, more varied, more connected lives, we can color code that on a schedule to help measure progress, to help kind of see where we're pulling things in. We can also use a schedule like this for planning too, as an idea for how could we do this in the future. But the key thing is we're pulling in all of these integrated supports in areas where we used to rely on just one thing for the person. This helps them build more stable, connected relationships in their communities. It helps them develop more of their own skills and assets that they can rely on. And it also encourages relationships within the family too, that may have gotten a little bit lost along the way as we push and pull between family supports and formalized eligibility supports. So we'll come back to the integrated STAR and some of these concepts, but we want to start talking about how you can use these tools specifically for organizational change. And I'm going to hand it over to Britta.
Thanks, Jenna. And so, as Jenna kind of hit on the tools that we're going to be kind of digging into today, and talked about what that looks like for supporting individuals receiving services. We're going to pivot now into digging into how these can also be applied, the framework, this way of thinking, and these tools can be helpful at our organizational, community, and systems level to really improve supports to individuals and their families, as using these tools as a way to solve problems, troubleshoot, and really plan for the future. So we're talking about community integration, right? We're talking about how can we support people to live within their communities and in the context of their families and where their strengths and their interests are. How do we help people discover those interests and really start digging into and better understanding opportunities that are out there? How do we support people to build those connections that really Jenna was hitting on with that, the mapping supports or that colorful life on the schedule. How do we ensure that we're working on outcomes? We're really looking at progress, that trajectory up toward that vision that is important to them. And so when we talk about community integration and we're talking about, system transformation and transforming or innovating service delivery models, the setting or where those services are provided is one aspect of how we provide services in communities. But it's not the only measure. It really, what we want to look at is, what is the vision? How can we understand where people's gifts and talents and interests and preferences are valued in communities, and help to make those connections and move them along toward that vision. And so keep that in mind when we're talking about community integration, that it's not meaning that it means only in these settings that we would call community. This is, I think, something to always bring to the surface when we're talking about just system transformation and provider transformation, is these core beliefs from Making a Difference by Beth Mount and John O'Brien. And so what these tell us, that we make a difference when we make a connection that helps a person move into community life. People have something to contribute, and somebody needs what gifts they have. We're moving beyond services, beyond protecting, beyond where they currently are. We all desire something more, and being part of the community is essential to a good life. It's a way for everyone to belong. So keeping these core beliefs in mind as we're thinking about how can these concepts and tools help us design a system of supports that enhances the lives of the people that we support and their families and communities. So community integrated services. So this has been a hot topic as a adult day support and vocational rehabilitation service perspective. And ultimately, though, this is the goal for all people. And that is kind of where this Charting the Life Course framework comes in, is that it's not, again, not about the services that they're receiving, but the pathway that they're on to live a truly integrated community life. And so how can we look at providing services that help us get there? And we want to make sure that we are driven, that person is, we're using what we know about their gifts and their talents and their strengths and interests to really drive what these look like, that we're purposeful, we're intentional about what we're trying to do. And we're again, focusing on that movement on a trajectory towards that vision that person has. We know that connections happen and learning happens when we have real world experiences. And so, focusing on those services that are meaningful to that individual. And then that experiences are really based on mutual interests. They're based on building necessary skills, but ultimately we're meeting people where they're at and we're supporting them along that trajectory. So as we kind of talk about this organizational and strategic planning, was trying to get a little bit to the why behind why we're talking about this today, right? Through the community. And again, this framework can be applied in many different ways and in many different levels. And so as we are kind of responding to lots of changes that are happening within our system, but also in our world, and also as we're kind of navigating through this time frame in the post, I'm not going to say the word because I think we made a pact to not say that, but we're in this space in the world where we're really trying to figure out what does this and can this look like. And I think, we're realizing as a society at large that we're not going to flip the lights back on and go back to, December of 2019. And so in doing that, kind of thinking about these tools and the way of how do we use these ideas to help organizations to not only support people to better understand and access these tools, but to assess and enhance and develop, evaluate policies and practices and procedures that really ensure that people and family-centered supports are provided and helping people lead to their good life. So we're going to kind of dig into that side of it for now, and then we're going to get back to, okay, now how do I get started in this? So stay with us as we're kind of looking bigger picture a little bit for right now, but we are going to kind of bring it back to how do we do it in real life? So this is an example and kind of a outline of what it might look like for an organization to utilize the trajectory to explore and to plan for what their vision is, so that first of all, kind of ensuring that everyone involved, including individuals served, families, your staff, the community, we have this common language and vision to make sure that we're making those connections between our policies and our practices, organizational and individual outcomes, and it helps all of our stakeholders kind of act on this shared overarching vision of what is it that we're actually trying to do. And so if you look up at the vision of what I want, we're really not, again, not for each individual, but this would be that organization's vision. So what is it that what do we envision that we are helping, that we are doing for people that are receiving services, for families, for staff, for communities? So what is it? Why are we here? What's our big why in our vision? And again, a lot of that stems from that bottom box of things that we're trying to avoid, or things that we don't want, or things that we want to move away from possibly. And so the arrow going up and on the top, we're going to start looking at what are the things and how can we brainstorm the strengths and opportunities within our organization that are helping us to move toward that vision, or helping us to create what it is that we're trying to do. And then in that too, we're also coming up with and brainstorming the challenges or the barriers that are either not supporting growth towards that vision, or are ultimately pointing us directly to the things that we're trying to avoid or trying to change. So this is a way to kind of look at, from a planning perspective, what is that vision? What are we trying to do? And then how can we be strategic as an organization to move in this direction, to make this come to life? It's kind of that, I always say, like the guiding star, the thing that we can come back to say, how do we evaluate what we're doing, but also how do we be intentional, and how do we make sure that we as the agency also have what it is, and learn from our experiences and identify future opportunities and experiences to move us forward. This is an example that was done quite a while ago by my team's lead, and he worked in the Southwest region of the state, and kind of brought this to his community of practice that's really developing this vision and plan for system transformation. And so this is systematically, so provider transformation in Ohio overall. So you can see where that brainstorming and kind of looking at what is it that we're trying to do? What is it that, when we say provider transformation in Ohio, what does that mean? What are we trying to not have happen? What does it not look like? And then we're utilizing our past experiences and our and planning for the future to determine how do we get on this trajectory. And so just kind of looking at it from this view and just giving you an example of, this is a bigger system of what is it we're trying to do with provider transformation, and it can be used on any level of that kind of strategic planning, organizational transformation work. Okay, so we are going to do an activity. This is going to be in breakout rooms, nobody leave. If you do not feel comfortable being in a breakout room, you can stay back and use this as self-reflection, but really hope that you jump in and engage with other people to start thinking about what is this trajectory that they're speaking of, and how can I start using it in ways, in multiple ways. And so I think that the best way to become more familiar with Charting the Life Course tools is for us to do it ourselves and spend some time digging into it. So we want you to take, I think we'll do like 15 minutes. Does that seem about right, Jenna? Okay. I want you to take about 15 minutes to really start thinking about the vision that you maybe have for your organization and the people that you support. If you're not, if that doesn't make sense to you, then use it for yourself, even personally or professionally. And you can think of it more broadly, or you can focus on a particular area or aspect if you want. And so just use the tool to write down what you want and don't want, and then start brainstorming kind of information about your past experiences and what have helped you move towards that vision, as well as any experiences that have pushed you towards things you don't want or haven't supported that movement toward that vision. So then we'll come back together and kind of do some share out. And so you should have access to these tools through the handouts that you received by email. If you don't, I think that's in the chat as well. And we'll go ahead and open up breakout rooms.
I'll go ahead and open them up. I just want to say we might move a few people around in the first minute or two. So don't be surprised if you're switched from room to room. We just want to make sure that there's a good balance once everybody goes over. Okay.
Talk to you soon. It looks like people are coming back at a rapid pace now. Welcome back. Apologize if you were in a room and weren't able to engage with anyone, or weren't able to get into a room with people. That sometimes happens when we have these large groups, but appreciate those that were able to jump in and have some conversations. Just want to open it up and get some feedback. So is anybody interested in unmuting, or you please feel free to use the chat. What kind of came to the surface? What are some of the takeaways? Share what you kind of maybe had as an experience, maybe not even as what you have on the trajectory, but what was it like to think in this way?
Hi, I'm Tammy Kane, and we actually, two of us in the group had family members that were on the spectrum. I was talking about my nephew, who I've raised since he was 14. He's now 28. But it was talking about looking at, for him, the box of what I don't want is much bigger than the vision for what I want. And I think it's having that conversation. He's a very intelligent young man with Asperger's, but also a huge trauma history. And so he's Temple Grandin would not be happy with me, because he's the typical kid living in my basement apartment, playing video games, because he quit his job at Kroger's in July that he had for 5 years. And now he's kind of like in a hidey hole. So it's like having those honest conversations with him, understanding his trauma, but also how that affects even the families I serve in my job, of having those honest conversations and being respectful of especially our young adults who want to be making choices, even though, when he quit his job, it was just like, oh, this is what's going to happen. And him not even inviting me in prior to making that decision. So I think that being a family member, that's also the individuals we serve. They do make rash decisions sometimes, as well as families do. So we had a great conversation about providing vision for him as well as our families. So I thought it was pretty nice to have that conversation with them.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Tammy. Marcia, I see you have your hand up.
Hi, thank you so much. And I would agree. So I work for an agency that does a mobile day program. So we're always out in the community and finding different organizations and institutions to partner with. And what I found really helpful was what I don't want, because I found I was really able to identify, okay, yeah, what are the sticking points that keep coming up, so that I could really refine what do I want. And things that came up for me was doing things just novelty, like just filling up time, going to this thing and that thing and this thing and that thing, which we can do a lot because there's so much out there in the community. But what I've found is that having sustained routine relationships really, really helps create some sort of structure. So anyway, just the actual activity of seeing, yeah, what I don't want, what I want, and then really going into, well, what have we already built in my, you know, I'm just one of the employees, but just in terms of what have I already done that I could build on, so that I'm not just kind of leaning towards the flow of the group, because so much of what I want to be doing is supporting what people want. And then also, how can I integrate and like help support to support that sustainable and growth mindset kind of thing, programming that supports developing relationships, that supports that kind of like having activities that people remember versus what did we do last week? Did we go to the pool? Did we go to, you know, like, oh yeah, we saw Mary the librarian last week, you know, having that kind of more impactful experience without driving too much and really letting my clients drive. So figuratively, not literally. Okay, thank you.
Great insights there. Love that. Amy, I think you had your hand up first.
Oh, I just wanted to say that for me, with my group, they were awesome. We just ended up taking one of my clients that I work with and kind of working through his situation. And, you know, not that we gave him up with any great solutions or answers or whatever, but for me, the process of doing that with someone else that is an equal peer person was giving me ideas to take back to him, to sit down with him. And when I fill this out with him and am dealing with him, I'm going to be thinking a little bit differently because of my peer input before. And so that was real beneficial to me. So I found out that, you know, a little trick for me is maybe to talk through this before I actually sit down with my client and kind of have a pre-plan in my head of questions to ask and places to go and see what happens, because it got me thinking differently.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Kimberly?
Hi. Yeah, so one of the things for me and for who I work with, the clients that I work with actually are usually mental illness and substance abuse. So I work in job development and for those individuals. And so one of the biggest things that we have seen or that I have come across, because I live in a very rural area, there's a lot of stigma. So just trying to use that trajectory to get more support and to get more employers kind of on board. And then the biggest thing that when we talked about that star in the beginning, most of my clients don't have that family support or don't have those natural supports. So it was really, that was kind of what we focused on, how we can get those more natural supports and community supports behind these individuals that are wanting to go to work or on their way to wanting to be in recovery.
Yeah, great point. Just more about, and we're gonna dig into that star a lot more and a lot more of how we kind of utilize this vision again as that kind of guiding star for us. I loved that people brought back that it was nice to be able to think about what I don't want, and that really is where we may have started or where we may have had more to think through. And that's probably based on past experiences, right? And so you're starting to think through what are those past experiences that really led to the things that I don't want, because otherwise those wouldn't come so naturally to our thinking, right? And so it's, again, there's no right or wrong way of where to start with a trajectory or with any of these tools, ensuring that we are really just honing in on identifying what can this look like, and from this organizational view, that clear vision to help drive what we do within services, but also what we do with how we fill those buckets that we talked about in the beginning too, right? How do we as an agency build our integrated star? How do we as an agency share and gather information? How do we as an agency build relationships and connections to help build out relationships and help make those connections in community with people? So we're gonna keep kind of digging into the integrated STAR and keep in mind this vision. And so if you did think of or start to identify that vision, if we put that into a middle of an integrated support STAR, we put your vision, it wouldn't say organization's vision in the middle. It would say whatever your vision is. Or it may just say your organization name. If you're really just kind of mapping, what are all those things that are in our buckets? What are all these things that we have access to as an agency? And so again, using our integrated STAR, it's helping us with planning, it's helping with problem solving, it's helping to brainstorm possibilities and resources. And so you could put the organization vision or name, you could select a specific barrier that maybe you identified as you were thinking through your trajectory. And so something that may have come up that you maybe want to prevent, and then some past experiences that you would identify as a barrier, putting that in the middle to start problem solving. Well, what are the resources that we would need to look into? And so you can see how nothing had really changed in this STAR as far as what are those areas, but we're changing the lens that we're looking at it. We're looking at whatever specific to that organization. So what are the organization and your personnel, right? The people who work there, the people that you have as part of your teams. What are their skills? What are their life experiences? What strengths and education and training do you have as an organization? And do each of the people that are part of your organization bring to the table? What are the assets that you have? What are the organization's belongings and tangible resources? Those things that I have access to. In relationships, still, again, looking at what are the relationships that we have built as an organization, who are the relationships that come to our organization through people that we serve, through their families, and through our staff and the members of our organization. This includes formal and informal relationships, internal and external relationships. We're really looking very broadly at this, not just maybe a relationship that would be like a contract relationship, right? These are the relationships that we have formally, but also informally. Technology, right? What do we have available? How do we look at all different ways that technology can support this vision? And then the community-based, right? These are, where are the places, the groups, the communities, the membership organizations, local services and public resources that we can, that we have access to as an agency. And then again, looking at the eligible specific, what are the resources that are that can support this vision from that eligibility specific lens, which are our services, our funding, some grants, maybe certifications, partnerships, training, technical assistance, networks, right? Those things that are available to us in this eligibility specific realm. So as you're thinking through, this is another tool that is available that it was designed to be developmental disability specific. And it's really about imagining a different way of doing things, but helping people to explore those possibilities. And so this can really help with generating new ideas and considering new resources or supports to try. And so you can see at the top row, it's organized by those life domains. The middle row highlights the current and new possibilities happening around the country, and the bottom row lists traditional possibilities that have existed for many years. And so you can see that at the very top there, under all the domains, it says new ideas, things that someone has tried or that you can replicate or adapt, or things that we haven't even thought of yet, right? That's where the innovation lies, in that very top row. And so this resource isn't one that we want to utilize as a way to maybe pull from and place on a trajectory, but it is a great tool to help start thinking through and help generating new ideas and considering what resources to try. So looking at this from the lens of organizational strategic planning and transformation, this could be a tool that you can use to explore and develop new ideas and new ways to support people. This is an example of one that was used again with that Southwest regional community of practice, where they were starting to the what you do to people, the how you help create that vision or help support that vision you have for your organization. And you're using these domains as a way to kind of start brainstorming new or innovative ways that we may be putting onto our trajectory because they're very specific to that vision that we have. Okay, so when we are talking about community and talking about when we are thinking through our strategic planning and thinking about what are those things that we can access within those communities that we are providing services in. And so community is not just geography, it's not just where you're at or where you live, but it's about personal connection, and if not more than proximity to others, right? So thinking about your neighbor versus your place, your connections that you have, that is the community that we are kind of broadening the way that we're thinking as well. So communities is a network of people that come together regularly for something in common. So they can be actual communities that come together in formal or informal ways. They kind of have some form of social obligation around a common interest that pulls them together. And then we also have virtual communities that are online and other tech-enabled connections that, again, stem around this common cause or common interest. So we are kind of looking at, we're discovering through community mapping elements of a community, or identifying on a map the places and spaces where resources exist and where people gather around issues that are important to them. And so we're trying to start identifying formal and informal aspects of community that can focus on the specific elements important to the mapper. So important to the organization in this mindset, but or important to a person. And so you can start kind of inventorying those different things that are in the community and different resources that are out there, informal and formal groups, by starting, like you can do Google searches, we can use meetup.com, we can ask others, right? Talk to locals, find out what's happening, or being like out there and observing where are people gathering and where does it seem that these communities are around this commonality or around a common issue or interest. And so using that integrated support star, oh, I think that looks weird. Maybe just keep clicking until it's full. There we go. That's the one I was looking for first, that middle star. And so if we're mapping the community, we look for those places and spaces that people are gathering and engaging. And so although we're looking at a place or a space, we also need to recognize and remember that there's other groups and connections and communities that may also be present. And so that may be that more informal area of what's available in community. And so when we're exploring spaces like churches, community centers, restaurants, tavern settings, we really want to make sure we're finding all those potential community resources. So not just we go to church for that spiritual side of things, but what other communities exist here and where are those shared interests and when do people engage and come together? And so this integrated support star is a way to start thinking about how can we use this to capture and organize this formal and informal aspects of community. And so, of course, you can use any formats to do this, but we're really thinking through this example of a public library. We're digging a little deeper into what groups are sponsored by the library and other setting. When do people meet and who can join? Who uses the library on a regular basis? Not just, again, what is available there, but as you can see, the personal strengths and assets, these are the things that we get when we go to the library. And so we're really looking at this accessibility piece as well, right? What do we know about the place and the space? And so I've been identifying, what was the feel there? Was it quiet? Was it loud? What were the characteristics of the location? Is there parking that needs to be, that we need to know something about the parking situation? Do we need to know about accessible bathrooms potentially, or what are those qualities and strengths and assets of the actual place, the technology that's available. And you can see this is just a very beginning. I just pulled up a public library site and was able to start filling out this star very, very quickly. And so then what happens is when we're looking at this relationship or this community place called the public library, that we're not just going there to, just get books or just look at newspapers. And that's kind of the lens that we look at it. But what are all those other things that are happening so that we can better understand where this resource can be an asset and how? And so not just going to the library, but where can that library be used as a resource to help make and support connections within the broader community that uses it. Another way to think about the integrated support star is for personal resource mapping for your staff. And so asking DSPs or other staff to kind of map the resources that they bring to their work or have access to. I think this is something that, maybe historically it hasn't really been thought of, that, these relationships that we all have outside of work don't necessarily come to work with us, but they're still a part of us in every day, right? And so how do we better understand all of those personal strengths and assets that each person that's part of your organization brings to the table? And so this is a way to help staff learn about charting the life course and start thinking about integrated supports. It can also kind of help them feel more confident by highlighting their strengths and their assets, and maybe lead to some moments of them making some potential connections that they can really help support people to move forward. So they don't maybe realize even how these things can be part of how they're supporting people. And so, this is an example of if this staff person were to kind of start looking through what are those integrated supports that she brings to the table, then that can be an activity to just help with training and awareness for staff. But it's also about how do we tap into and utilize the resources that we already have in an intentional way. I'm going to pass it back to Jenna now. We're going to kind of bring it back down to transitioning to community-based experiences one person at a time.
Thanks, Britta. Yeah, so far we've been mostly talking about these tools and this framework in the context of, shifting your organization and getting your organization where you want it to go. But of course, we can use these same tools and principles to support each person that we provide services to. So we're going to look at some of the same tools and concepts, but just through a little different of a lens. And I want to start with, kind of coming back to the trajectory. So it sounds like some of you have already used the trajectory a little bit for supporting folks, or in your breakout room, you might have had a chance to use this for a person rather than your organization. The thing I want to emphasize is that the process is very much the same. So when you're thinking about using the trajectory with somebody that you support or helping them to use it on their own, really just explaining it in that straightforward way. It's designed to be pretty easy for almost anybody to use. So in most cases, this is really just going to start with a conversation. Keep in mind that these tools are really just meant to be a way to keep and organize and record and communicate ideas. They were never meant to be filled out, sign of the way that you would do a form, starting at the beginning and ending at the end and making sure that every part is filled out. Every person can kind of use the tools in a way that's comfortable for them. Some people might not even want to use a paper version of the tool or an online version. They might just want to talk through these different aspects, and that's really helpful and valuable as well. So generally, when you're helping somebody to use the trajectory, just kind of starting with that conversation about, what would you like to plan for? What would you like to think about? Some people might like to plan out really broadly, thinking about what do I want the next 5 years of my life to look like. Other people might want to use the trajectory for a more focused plan or goal. So something like, what kind of job would I like to have next year? It can really be used for any type of scale or situation. So another thing that you can help people think about as they're thinking about their vision are different domains of life. And I know sometimes when we're providing particularly day or employment or vocational services, we really focus so much on this daily life and employment domain. And that makes sense. It's right in the name of the services that we're providing. But I think it's important to keep in mind that even if you're providing, just adult day supports, you could really fold in all of these different domains to the types of supports that you're helping to provide for somebody and the types of connections and experiences that you're helping to facilitate for them. It's also really important to just have a conversation about these different domains with folks. Sometimes, particularly people who have high support needs or complex needs, sometimes the conversation can feel like it just focuses on one or two domains. Particularly, we see this a lot with health and safety for folks. We want to consider all of the domains, but at the end of the day, we want to really prioritize on the things that are the most important to the person. We want to make sure that we are thinking about things like health and safety as we structure services and support. But really, the goals and the outcomes that we're working towards with people should be person-driven. They should be the things that the people that we support care about. So going back to the trajectory, just to give a really quick walkthrough of how this might look a little bit different as you're doing it with an individual person versus as an organization. A lot of times folks can find it helpful to have this conversation in a small group or as a dialogue if they don't want to kind of think through these things just on their own. So if you're helping somebody to do this, you can start with the boxes on the right, ask them simple questions about what do you want? What do you not want? Help them record their responses there. And some people also find that it's helpful to have pictures here. People like to convey their thoughts and ideas in all different kinds of ways. So again, don't feel like there's a right or a wrong way to use these tools. It's really the conversations and the thoughts that come out of these conversations that are the important part. Next, you can have them think about past experiences that have helped to push them towards what they want for themselves, things that have pushed them towards what they don't want. And they can also think about things that could come up too, that could potentially become barriers or that could potentially help them. By doing this, you'll be able to get a better sense, not just of what the person wants for themselves and what they want to avoid, but also what do they already know? Kind of thinking back to the integrated support star. I know how to do most household chores and use lists to stay organized from this example. That's a great example of something that goes into that personal strengths and assets category. That also tells us as we're service planning, this person maybe doesn't need a lot of support in that area. They've noted they've had a little bit more difficulty managing money and forming a personal budget. So it helps us really focus around not just what they want, but also thinking a little bit about, what kinds of things do I need to have in my life to get towards those goals, and how can people support me to attain those skills or have those experiences. And again, just like the star example that I showed you earlier, in most cases, people have a lot more information on their trajectory than this. This is really just a simplified example to help walk you through the process. So once you've had these conversations, whether you've used the tools directly, whether you've recorded things in a different way, it's really important to share the things that you've learned about people with other folks who are important to them and who support them in their lives, and to think about how the team can wrap around the person holistically. We don't just exist in a vacuum. So what I do during the day kind of flows into my home life a little bit. We can develop some of the same skills and support some of the same development across environments. So helping people to kind of see how the different parts of their lives can come together to lead towards what they want. So how do we kind of pull all of this together, this organizational change that many of you are engaged in, along with helping each person at a time? Where do you start? One great way to start is to just start these conversations, start using the framework and the tools to guide conversations with each person and their team about what they want, and then also within your work teams about what you want as an organization. For each person that you support, offer opportunities for new experiences to explore potential relationships and try new things. When we think about those boxes about what I want and what I don't want, as Britta mentioned, sometimes it's easier to say what we don't want because that reflects experiences that we've had. But it may be hard to imagine what we do want. We might just have a vague idea about that, and we need experiences to help us learn what's possible and to discover new interests or new skills that we have. And then definitely consider different types of supports. So just because somebody's using one type of support now doesn't mean that they're locked into using that to continue along their trajectory. Maybe they need a different mix of supports. And these might not all be formal eligibility-based services too. We can absolutely weave in other types of supports for folks that are available through things like relationships, technology, and community-based resources. So different services that you may use. Again, I know a lot of you are providing adult day supports and vocational habilitation. I think we saw a fair number of residential and HPC folks here today. But think about how you can potentially integrate these other supports into your practice or relationships that you can form with other agencies or other folks in your community that can provide these types of supports for people. One of the things that it's important to do as people progress along their trajectory is to note progress and to know when's it time to shift? When do we, maybe implement other strategies or other supports to help people get to next steps? One of the things that can be really challenging as you're making this transition is scheduling. I think one of the things that's really important to note is that scheduling is going to be an ongoing activity. When I showed you those schedules earlier, kind of the contrast between the person's initial schedule versus what their schedule looked like when they were having a much richer, fuller life, you can see there were some pretty drastic differences there. People might move from a more traditional Monday through Friday schedule to something that includes evenings or weekends. And it's important for people to not feel like they're locked into something. Just because I signed up for swimming on Saturdays right now doesn't mean that I want to go swimming every Saturday for the rest of my life. You might want to move things around as situations change or as people develop different relationships. Again, begin with the preferences and needs of each person. If you're providing group services, look for shared interests and good matches with peers. I think shared interests is something that we tend to go straight towards, but sometimes relationships with other people in the group can be equally, if not more important for folks. I'm not likely to have a great experience, even doing something I like, if I had to spend the whole day with 2 or 3 people that I don't much care for. So keep those kinds of things in mind. And this kind of makes me think of Britta's example with the library too. Shared interests can be, a pretty broad thing. You could potentially be supporting 3 or 4 people at the library each exploring a different interest. Maybe one person's participating in a book club, another person is using the media resources, somebody else is helping with story time in the children's area. So when you're considering how to structure these groups, just don't feel so locked in to having to support very particular interests in a very regimented way. We can be much broader than that and more creative. Also, it can be really helpful in groups to help if you have people who have different support needs in the group. So if I'm going out in a group with 3 or 4 folks who all have really high level support needs, that can be very challenging to help people meet and interact with other folks in the community, to have meaningful and enriching experiences. A lot of the time may just be spent providing those extensive supports that folks need. Whereas if we vary our groups a little bit, this can kind of help people with things like just peer assistance, getting help from peers, getting help from other folks who are engaging at the same community site. This is why I tell people to generally trust the community. I've talked to an awful lot of providers, been a provider for a long time myself too. I have to say, overwhelmingly, people have pretty positive experiences with community members. For small things, if you need a little help when you're in the community, you can pretty safely rely on other people who are sharing the space with you to be good folks and to lend a hand as necessary. And then lastly, eliminate unnecessary travel. One of the trends that you might see with folks who receive services are, that they're spending an awful lot of their day just going in between places. So if that's the case, trying to cut that out where you can, so that it leaves more time in the day for things that people really care about. Unless they love, riding on the van all day, and that can be an interest. So again, be person-centered with this. Maximize opportunities for informal and integrated supports. Like I mentioned, you will generally find friendly folks places that you go, and seek out routine and recurring experiences rather than constantly rotating. This is especially critical when we're helping people to form connections, develop relationships in the community. You generally meet people by being in the same space at the same time a lot. So kind of back to that example of maybe I like to go to the pool on Saturdays. Maybe that is something that I continue to have as very important to me because there are other people that I see there who are always there on Saturdays. If I start going on Tuesday nights, I might not know anybody who goes to the pool then, and I won't have as rich of an experience. Use public resources that are available to everyone. Think about this with everything. Transit and transportation, libraries and community centers can be incredibly rich resources, but every community is different and you know your community best. So this really goes back to kind of mapping those connections that you have in your immediate area and really tapping into the connections and resources that your staff have. Where do they go on their days off? What do they do? Who do they know? Those are great places to start. Facilitate independence relationships and plan to fade supports over time. The services that we provide can be a really helpful way of initially connecting people to experiences and relationships. But if we don't eventually move beyond that, we're kind of limiting people to a certain level of experience. So as much as we can, thinking about how can somebody start engaging in this experience or in this interest or in this relationship more independently. We're really in some ways trying to work ourselves out of a job a little bit so that we can then move on and support other people to develop these same experiences. And lastly, track progress and change direction as you need to. Again, don't feel like you're locked into something. Especially, I think we do this sometimes with this thinking about things like an annual plan. You're like, oh, we'll just talk about it in 6 months when we meet for an annual meeting. Initiate conversations with team members as you need to and in real time so that people are able to progress. So I'm going to shift it back to organizational support with discovery for folks using the integrated STAR, because this will really kind of tie together some of the key concepts that we've been talking to up to this point. I'm going to hand it back over to Britta for this section.
Thanks, Jenna. So looking at this support STAR again in how Jenna kind of spoke to, we're identifying the vision for people, right? We're better understanding what is it, where are their interests, where are their skills, their preferences. And a lot of times, and sometimes we may be really honing in on helping to better understand that, right? Helping the person to have experiences to better inform their vision, right? To better inform what's next for them on this journey. And so this is an example of, if we put in the middle, if we're supporting individuals, either individually, or we're looking at groups, connecting people with that shared kind of need to really better understand and discover what their skills and interests and preferences and support strategies are. This is a way to kind of hone in, not just on large organization integrated STAR, but this is, hey, these are the needs or the things that are in the trajectory that are maybe barriers, or maybe things that aren't supporting our vision as an organization. And so we can put this commonality of this is what we are looking to brainstorm ideas about, and all those resources. And so you can see that there's lots of different things that are going to support helping people to discover who they are and what their vision is for their life. And so it's not just overarching. Now we're very much honing in on, where are those supports, where are the resources that are going to help us provide experiences with people to help them discover who they are. And so it's not just, again, we're not just looking at the services that we can provide as an agency, that eligibility specific green part of the STAR, but what are all those other places that we currently have relationships with that we can tap into based on people's interests. And so you're starting to kind of inventory that larger STAR of the library is, that's one little thing on this community-based STAR. And so you're kind of inventorying, what are those places and when would we tap into them? Why would they be useful? In what timeframes? We're going to show another integrated STAR. This is just another version of it that it's available. I believe that you got this in your handouts as well. But this is this is just the same integrated, same concepts. Nothing's changing, except it's used as more of a planning or exploration tool. And so it has each of the STAR areas is a now section and a future section. And so if you start to utilize this integrated support STAR, or even as you're planning, whether you use the tool or not, it's demonstrating that sometimes we may not, we may have more questions to answer. We may have more to do to help create the future STAR that's going to really move us toward, or give us the resources we need to help people, in this instance, discover their skills, interests, preferences, and support strategies. So this, if you kind of get into a personal or into an integrated support STAR and you don't have a lot in a certain section, or don't have a lot kind of overarching, then that just is a great place for us to start exploring possibilities and identifying what are those resources that we need to continue to discover, and that can lead to an action plan to help build those relationships or better understand what are the staff skills and interests and preferences, and how can we better discover that. So again, an integrated support STAR is not just about mapping and not just about coordinating supports. It's also a tool that can help us really dig into what other possibilities are out there. This is again, if this kind of hits on what Jenna talked about earlier, in that you're beginning with the preferences and the interests and the skills of each person. But we're also looking for these shared interests and good matches to form small groups and have experiences that may be in the same space and maybe even be in the same thing, but it doesn't have to just be everyone that goes to the library wants to be in the book club, for example. And so this is a way, and again, this is that not every library is the same. This is just all of these are just examples to kind of demonstrate the uses of these tools and this way of thinking. And so, as you can see, we're really honing in on, we know what is available at the resources or at the library from that previous integrated STAR that we showed, but what are the experiences there? What are the things that what are the experiences we can support people to have and to tap into to start building relationships and connections? And that again kind of hits on, everybody that you're supporting in a group doesn't necessarily have to have that exact aligned interest. We need to start with what with each of the people that we support, and we're looking at it from the lens of how can this experience support each of those individual visions. Okay, so this is again just another way to look at it. We're digging deeper into, we know what's available at the library as resources globally from this lens. What are these experiences that could support discovery for people? So this was taking our organizational vision, taking the kind of overarching, who are we, what are we trying to do, what are all the resources we have access to, supporting people to better understand their vision and their individual integrated support stars, and then how are we helping them to individually build their integrated support stars? How are we using it as an organization to continue to grow and build on those relationships that really help us to then be intentional and individualized and support each person based on who they are and what they want in their life. All right, so we talked about the integrated support star quite a bit. We're not going to go into breakout rooms, but like to take some time to kind of reflect on this as well, as we did with the trajectory. And so if you could use the chat or raise your hand and unmute and just share maybe what are some of the first things that came to mind that you could find use of the integrated support star? What are some ways that you can envision using this or when it could be helpful?
I just wanted to add that I think anytime you're making like a big change that's kind of scary to you, it's helpful to use those tools just to remember, in different situations, who is that person you can go to, or that phone you can go to, or that technology, or whatever that may be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Britta, this is Ann. I am with the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities Provider Resources and Support Team. And one of the things that we've been talking about in using the integrated STAR is forward thinking. We know we're all dealing with staffing issues right now, but we would love to be able to see this be part of individual selection of who works with them, right? So beginning to match people up by their strengths, by their interest, by the things that are important to and for them, with DSPs, independent providers, and provider agencies who maybe are sharing of those same ideas and thoughts, or have DSPs who have similar interest as the folks that they are supporting. So, again, forward thinking, because we know right now we're definitely dealing with a provider staffing issue, but we would love to see this become part of the provider selection process with individuals.
Yeah, thanks, Ann. That's good perspective. And I think at the agency level, that kind of hits on, we're identifying who our staff are and what they bring through that integrated support star potentially. And then that tools when we're talking about the experiences, what it's actually going to look like, then we're able to go back to that and know, when does it make sense to tap into this? How do we utilize and leverage the resources that each person that makes our organization, how do we do that? And so when you're thinking about an integrated star too, when we're looking at it more globally, we're not going to always be tapping into, and even like if I were to do one on myself, I'm not always going to be tapping into the resources, regardless, right? There's people that I have relationships with that I would go to for different things, right? I'm supported differently through those relationships. And so you can really use this star to keep digging, to really get to root areas of that you're trying to plan or brainstorm for. Angie, did you have your hand up?
I was just going to add that it helps you to think outside of your comfort zone. So it reminds you that there's other places for supports, and focuses on, not only what skill they have currently, but what kind of where they're going to for the future as well. So it definitely is a great visual reminder for those type of activities and different things.
Absolutely.
We're seeing some great things in the chat. Anything from an IEP meeting, somebody else reiterated what Janet had said about anytime you're having any sort of change, there's the recognized obvious space of transition and that transition age youth. And then another parent even said how it helps families kind of work through their own misconceptions of what their child can accomplish. And it really changes that conversation, which I love. And then how to effectively work with staff. I know that we also did, somebody had mentioned the staffing shortage, and Amy Clausen up in this area, in Cleveland area, another ambassador had done one around the direct support shortage and how we could utilize it to rethink possibility in that space. So some great things happening here.
Yeah, it can help kind of make things less scary when there's some unknowns, right? We maybe don't know, exactly what these supports are going to look like or what they're going to be able to do as a support, but we're not limiting that conversation to just what eligibility specific services can provide. Sharon? Sharon, we're not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh,
There
yes,
we
we
go.
can.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I do a lot of individual employment supports, and what I'm using that for is to help find some natural supports within the employment to help with the transportation crisis that we're having right now. So using that to see who's available to help my individual get to and from their place of employment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Putting transportation in the middle. And then you're looking at, each of those things. And we're not just looking at what's eligible specific or, maybe public transportation. How else can we look at this more broadly and really start to think outside the box to come up with solutions and come up with support strategies that are sustainable and that can meet people's needs.
That brings up another point with employment when you think about it, maintaining employment, right? When you think about what would make me stay supported or feel supported in this job so I stay, right? Well, there was an individual earlier that spoke about her nephew who left his job of 5 years. What was missing, and using that star to really identify what we could have done proactively or now hindsight to say, what personal strengths are we not highlighting that we could better highlight? What assets did he have that could have been played differently? Or maybe that tells us that this is no longer the job and how to move forward. So I think there's some real keys to that tool here too.
Yeah, somebody had added in the chat that this integrated support star could be helpful in starting the technology first conversations, and I completely agree. When we talk about technology first, we're talking about this integrated support star, that technology is an equal part of this star, right? It's not just about the services, the services that could be provided to people through technology, but it's also about how do we use the technology that we all use on a daily basis to make our lives easier. And in any scenario that we're brainstorming possibilities or exploring supports, that's a part of this bigger picture, right? It's not something that is separate. It's not something that is, it is equal to all of these other areas of the support star. And so I think that was a really good thought there on Tech First. Just reading through the chat, this is wonderful. If you all have not read through, lots of great insights here, highlighting people's strengths. Any transition age is really coming to the surface here. I certainly talk about this tool with transition age youth frequently, right? Because lots of things in your support star change when you have big changes in life, like leaving that school age, right? Your relationships look different, and that's true for everyone, right? Your relationships look different. I was talking with a family not too long ago that was like, oh my gosh, my oldest son went to college, and you can imagine the things that he had to learn this past month, the skills and the strengths that just living on our own for the first time, or even experiencing life that is not kind of this school age life. How many of those personal strengths and assets kind of blossom at that time too? What technology is out there? How are we tapping into that? The community based, and I think with transition age youth, this eligible specific space of kind of helping teams think through there's going to be changes to this star ongoing as we have experiences, as we have connections, as we learn about new resources, and when you transition out of school, the school eligible specific support kind of falls off your star, but we are building it with other things, right? We're tapping into all of these other supports to make that less of a transition that we don't feel that support, right? So I think that's really coming through in the chat. Ashley.
Hello. First of all, I second that because I'm a transition SSA and I use this all the time. But I'm also an advisor for our Action Club in Columbiana County, which is a service learning program under Kiwanis for adults with disabilities. And I think when we do our officer training next month, we're going to have our officers use this tool and the trajectory to kind of approach the direction they want their club to take. And where is the club well supported? Where do we need to build our connections in the community and with other resources? And kind of what do they as individuals bring to the club? Because sometimes that's hard to recognize, to build that confidence and help empower them that they're bringing something to the table.
Awesome, Ashley. I love that. Very cool. Very cool understanding of this is not specific to any one group of people or any one person. This is really global tools. I use the integrated support star when I was taking a very long road trip with my children by myself. And that was the moment for me where I was like, oh my gosh, this was so helpful in giving myself the confidence to just actually go through with it, because I really wanted to, but I was scared. So yeah, I think that global use of this star hopefully came across loud and clear today as we showed you all the different ways that you can think and utilize the star, but really just this overall way of thinking. We all use supports on a day-to-day basis for all kinds of different things. And so that's the beauty of this integrated support star. All right, well, we're gonna finish up and get you out of here on time, hopefully. So when you're thinking through kind of these are kind of questions to help you evaluate current activities and services and consider new opportunities to better support that vision for a good life and to support progress. And so when you're planning, kind of thinking about the why, like how does this experience fit in the person's individual goals, kind of thinking back to that, the experiences at a public library star, right? Where does it fit in? Why does that make sense for this person? Is it in a location or where? So is it in a location that the person might later be able to access independently or with fewer paid supports? When is the scheduled time based on provider convenience, or is it on maximizing opportunities for relationship building? So when we're looking and evaluating and mapping what those connections and resources are in the community, that's a piece of it too, to better understand not just what groups use the library, but when do they use them? What are the times of days that people are coming together with those shared experiences and shared interests, those commonalities? And that is a big piece of what we're trying to do, making sure that people are where they want to be, but also maximizing opportunities for relationship building. So how were our group members selected or invited? Will everyone have that opportunity to develop community relationships? I think also in the who is that staff, right? So talking about aligning staff based on personality, based on shared interests, based on those connections that they may already have in the community, to help be that connector. And then what's next? And so what are some of the possible outcomes or next steps that are resulting from this experience? Are we going out to just better understand someone's interests and strengths? That is what we're going to need to bring back to better inform the plan, to better inform the intentional ways that we're able to support somebody. Okay, and then as you kind of support people in this way, we're kind of continuing this transition. We're continuing to have ongoing conversations. I think Jenna mentioned it's not a one and done thing with any of this, right? Our experiences every day and are impacting our trajectory, right? They are experiences. Our experiences are the things that help us to build our trajectory, to envision it. And it also is an ongoing thing that is never not changing, because if it's not, then it's maybe because we're not having the experiences, right? And so making sure that we're establishing more regular routine schedules, making sure that we really are moving forward, that we're not in this discovery mode forever, just going places without making meaning of it, without bringing it back to that person and that person's vision. There are sometimes, right, like I know we talk about, like, you might just meet that one person that changes the trajectory of your life. Like it could be that one person, that one experience, just in the right place at the right time, that I bumped into somebody that just changed everything, or just, took me under their wing. And I really was able to have different types of experiences for various reasons. And so this ongoing conversation about overall satisfaction with services, of how we're supporting people, but also how is it progressing them towards that vision and helping to define it, helping to better understand what are the intricate details that we are learning about and adding in. And then we're making adjustments as we learn from those experiences. So we're continuously kind of coming back to the table to brainstorm, and we're continuing to move forward. And so there are a variety of services and supports that are available to someone in achieving the life that they live. And so we want to ensure that teams leverage and explore all of these available supports that are included in our integrated support star. Our services are individualized, they're flexible, they're responsive, and they support progress toward desired outcomes for people. And again, being able to look at this framework and look at these tools in multiple different lenses and different perspectives to plan and to be more intentional and leveraging those supports to make things happen. Okay, so this kind of is looking at all the different ways that the Charting the Life course tools and the philosophy can can help us in our work. And so in strategic planning, we talked about developing the shared visions for organizational restructuring, looking at and maybe revamping or addressing or maybe enhancing our mission and vision statements, staff training and goals. We can use this for resource mapping. We can use these tools as a way to have that ongoing communication for what we don't want and what we want to help accomplish as a group of people supporting other people. We talked about using Charting the Life course in delivering supports. So developing trajectories and stars for each person that you support, not for, maybe it's with or helping them through it, or at least introducing the tools, right? Or supporting them. Aligning individual accomplishments with organizational and community ones, connecting the planning of supports with the providing of them with that purpose in mind. And then again, in the area of life domains, kind of communicating how you do what you do, using our domains to support the vision and mission that we have as an organization and as a system, and then as a way to develop new ideas and new ways to support people. As we kind of wrap today's session up, thank you all for sticking around with us. There are a regional innovation community of practices throughout the state. So I facilitate the one in Northeast region, Cleveland area. And then you can see where the email address is a clickable link in your PDF file. So email your community life engagement project manager. If you're not connected, to just continue these conversations. We want you to be able to now take what you heard today back to your regions and back to your organizations to really continue this work and continue identifying ways that this framework and these tools can really move our service delivery system forward in an innovative, intentional, and sustainable way. And so you can see that we have upcoming meetings in November on the slide. I'm sorry, I don't know why Keith's the register link didn't come through. So if you are in the Southwest region and are interested in joining that meeting on October 27th, email Keith and he will get you that registration link. Celia, I think you're going to go over this one.
I am, but I have a cart going by me, so give me a sec. I got up to Sandusky early for the Synergy conference, and so I had a cart of dishes running by me. But no, I wanted to make sure that as you hear and as you're listening and learning, and clearly there's just some great folks here that have been using the tools and are great in sharing ideas. Stay connected in those spaces. Join our community of practice for this work in Ohio, but also you can connect to any of that through our Family Resource Network of Ohio at frnohio.org. And I'm hoping Tracy or Britta or Jenna will throw that into the chat for me. But what's next for all of you as you look about this and you're scratching your head and you're like, what can I do? Just know that if you go to FRNO, there's a ton more trainings available. There's a calendar there. Join our listserv so that you can receive notifications if you're not already doing that. Any of the Ohio ambassadors are also listed on that site, and you'll find many folks that are available to you in your areas to help you brainstorm and think about what is possible. Any one of us, Britta, Jenna, and I are all available for that possibility. In addition to additional trainings, if you want to talk about how to integrate this more substantially within your organization, we would love to talk to you about that. There's also a training called Guided Implementation, where we really work with you over a series of 6 to 8 weeks intensely to learn with folks within your organization how you can do that. And then we can customize a training for your organization, any one of us at FRNO, and we'd be happy to do that too. So we're hoping that, and there will be a question on your evaluation that asks you if you know of some place that we can share this information. So if you're interested in any of that, you can put it there too.
Awesome. And then in your files, there is direct links to some of those Charting the Life course tools that the ones that we really hit on today. And then also through the Family Resource Network of Ohio. And then this final resource slide is a lot of resources that may also be helpful as we start thinking about adapting and enhancing the way that we deliver services to support people towards developing the life that they want. And so ensuring that we have these resources, not just, again, the tools. Hopefully you are finding ways that this can be a resource to you. And that the tools are not the actual forms or the actual trajectory or the integrated support star is not the only answer, right? We're still, we are using these tools as a way to think in a different way. And I think that's coming through in the chat around just shifting our focus. And so as you're using other resources and tapping into the Charting the Life course tools, hopefully you are set up to get moving in a direction, not for the people that you support, but also in this holistic way of thinking and planning for people. Our contact information is here as well. Please scan the code, or I think that there's going to be a link as well in the chat to complete your post-session evaluation. And I don't know if Jenna or Celia has anything to add on to the survey piece. I don't know.
I just want to thank everybody for coming, and we appreciate your time. What a great conversation. Just gets me really excited to hear what folks are doing. And I do want you to know that we want to capture what you're doing. As people shared here how they're using this in different places, we want to capture that. And if you can put on your evaluation in that box that kind of lets you put anything in there, that you are in fact willing to share stories of how you've used this and how it's changed the conversations, we would absolutely love to hear that. I want to thank Britta and Jenna for being fabulous. I learned so much when I'm with them every day. I want to thank Tracy. She kind of slipped out really quick this morning, but Tracy Mans pretty much makes everything behind the scenes happen and makes us all look really good. So I really, really appreciate her. And I want to put gold stars on everybody because I just heard things. I heard that reference to like the peers and that peer support and that conversation. And that's so important to recognize that our individuals have something to offer and bring to the room and just support each other, and encouraging that is awesome. That recognition of the don't want box, that just warmed my heart. Recognizing that in that don't want box, we might see family trauma, and being gentle and humble as you touch into those spaces. So all of it, I can't thank you guys enough. I'm just really pumped to have spent this morning with you. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.